My son stopped reacting to pain, and that should have terrified me sooner, but it didn't, because my husband called it discipline, and for a while I let myself believe that, until the day I watched my 8-year-old slam his fingers in the car door and just stand there, no scream, no tears, just staring at his hand like it didn't belong to him, and when I rushed over asking does it hurt, he shook his head too fast and said I'm okay even though his knuckles were already swelling, and that's when I realized I hadn't heard him cry in weeks, not after nightmares, not after falling off his bike. Not even when he scraped his entire arm on the pavement and just quietly went to wash the blood off like it was nothing. And suddenly my husband's rule didn't feel harmless anymore. Because it hadn't started out like that. It started as a joke the night we moved in together. He laughed and said, in this house we don't do crying. And my son laughed too because he thought it was funny. And I laughed because I didn't think he meant it. But then the first time my son cried over a broken toy my husband didn't laugh. He went completely still and said, what did I just say? And my son tried to stop. You could see him choking it down, wiping his face, nodding. And my husband smiled like that was the correct answer. And after that it became this quiet thing between them, something I wasn't fully part of. Every time my son's eyes filled up my husband would just look at him, not even say anything, just look, and my son would immediately shut it down, and I told myself it was teaching him to be strong, to regulate his emotions, all the things people say, until the day I found out what actually happened when he couldn't stop. Because that night I heard a noise from the hallway, not crying exactly, more like a muffled struggle, and I followed it to the bathroom where the door was closed, and I heard my husband's voice, calm and controlled, saying you can cry in here, not out there, understand, and my son's voice came out small and shaky, I'm trying, and then I heard him start crying again, louder this time, like it had been building up for days, and my husband said, sharper now, too loud, and there was this sudden silence, not natural silence, forced silence, and something in me dropped so fast it felt physical, like missing a step in the dark. And I pushed the door open and what I saw made everything click into place in the worst way. My son was sitting on the edge of the tub, his face red and wet, and my husband was standing in front of him holding a folded towel tightly over his mouth. Not enough to hurt him, just enough to smother the sound, and my son's eyes were wide, not crying anymore, just empty. And when my husband saw me he pulled the towel away like it was nothing and said he needs to learn, and I don't even remember deciding to move. I just grabbed my son and pulled him behind me and told my husband to get out, and he kept talking, saying I was overreacting, that this was discipline, that boys who cry grow up weak, and maybe part of me had believed that before, but not anymore, not after seeing my child look relieved to finally be allowed to breathe, and I locked the door, called the police, and held my son while he shook in my arms like he didn't know what he was allowed to do, and when the officers came and asked him gently what happens when he cries, he hesitated, looked at me, and then whispered I'm not supposed to, and that was enough. They took my husband out of the house that night, and everything after that was a blur of questions and explanations and trying to understand how I didn't see it sooner, but the part that stays with me, the part one can't shake, is what happened later when I tucked my son into bed and told him you can cry, it's okay, you don't have to stop, because he didn't, he just lay there staring at the ceiling, completely still, and after a long silence he asked me in this quiet, careful voice, what if I don't know how anymore?